what is DataDog? We do all things monitoring. So we collect information on applications, underlying infrastructure, on logs, all that fun stuff. We bring it in one place, let you monitor it, create dashboards, create alerts, let you know when something's going wrong with any of your systems or applications. It's a way to make sure everything's running healthily. We have this open source agent that you install on your servers, and it collects all this awesome information and sends it back to us so that we can analyze it. We're getting pretty big. We process trillions of data points every day. We have over 200 integrations with popular services and applications so that we can monitor everything that you're running. Also, we're hiring in a ton of different roles, from engineering to marketing to sales. So if you're interested or you think you have a good fit, come chat with someone here, and we'd love to tell you more and how you can apply. So like I said, we collect information from all different parts of your infrastructure, and we let you create awesome dashboards like this that give you status of how things are running, or dashboards like this. But beyond traditional metrics on systems and applications, we let you send metrics from pretty much anywhere. And you can create alerts on those and get notified when something's going wrong. So for instance, back when Pokemon Go was all the craze, I don't know, was that 2 years ago now? Approaching 2 years, but it's still relevant for this example. We created a dashboard that told you if Pokemon Go was running or not, right? Because it kept crashing and people were upset. So we created a website that told people when it was up and down. Totally custom. More recently, we created a dashboard so that you could see if your MTA line was delayed. This is actually pretty popular as well. But again, totally custom. And with DataDog, you can pretty much send anything you want into our system and dashboard it and track it and alert on it. So, for instance, cryptos. Everyone wants to know when Bitcoin's going to the moon. While we can't tell you when it's going to the moon, we can tell you when it's happening. Yeah, it's close. Because we have an API where you can basically send any data into DataDog. For instance, we created this awesome dashboard that tells you all about different crypto pairings and prices. For instance, you could see Bitcoin, Ethereum, we have Zcash, Ripple, different values all plugged into DataDog, and you can see all this in near real time, and you can customize it, and view data to your liking. We got a question, yeah. What's that? DataDog, there's pricing involved, yes. It's not that's how this beautiful office exists. We have lots of awesome customers. And beyond that, you can get alerted when something's happening. So for instance, if Bitcoin's price drops 10%, you can get an alert in something like a Slack channel. You might not want to set it to a 10% drop because that happens a lot right now. But beyond pricing, what else can you do? You can send events when a new coin is added to an exchange. Some of you may know that triggers price changes a lot. You can track Google and Twitter trends of things. I don't know. Really, sky's the limit. But at the end of the day, DataDog is really flexible and easy to use, and you can get set up really quick to monitor anything crypto related that you might be interested in. And here's a link to get started. You can also sign up at the back table, the raffle table. Is that right? We can help you sign up. And did I make that up? That's what it was. You can emailed it. So that's the link to get started and for a free trial. So that was DataDog in a nutshell. I don't want to bore you anymore. I'm going to pass it off to Rob, aka Crypto Bobby, who's going to lead the panel on forking.
Thank you. Appreciate it. What's up? No. Cool. Hey everybody, how's it going? Yeah, let's see. Hopefully the mics work. My name is Rob. Some of you might know me from talking on YouTube as Crypto Bobby. I am here with two people that actually know a lot more than me. I just talk way more than they do. So hopefully we'll switch that around today. Rocco and Srikar, you want to give introductions?
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Rocco, and I'm the former editor-in-chief of InvestFeed and I'm a current journalist in the space and advisor to a couple of projects as well.
Hi, I'm Shrikar. I started Chain Intelligence with a few of my friends. We've been helping some blockchain projects in the space. Yeah, that's kind of what we've been doing.
Well, the subject of today's discussion, I think, is more on the side of forks, and a lot of you might see that quite often, and there's literally a fork every freaking day. So we're going to talk about what those actually are and kind of how they work and everything like that. So the first question I'll get into, and we were talking about this a little bit beforehand, but what is actually the difference between a soft fork and a hard fork?
Sure. So a hard fork is basically backwards incompatible change, and a soft fork is backwards compatible. Sure. A soft fork is backwards compatible, but a hard fork isn't. And basically, hard forks have lately seen a lot of attention since there have been a lot of them. Starting with, but it hasn't been a new idea, right? We saw Bitcoin XT, Bitcoin Unlimited, and then actually Satoshi, if you look at the Bitcoin talk forums, in 2010, Satoshi talks about the possibility of fork. This was way back, even before there was a hard fork. Anyway, we can talk more about the history, but this goes back a long time, so it's kind of strange that it's seen a lot of attention recently. I think it's mostly price speculation.
Yeah, and a lot of what people know from forks comes down to, every new asset that comes out that, all of a sudden you hear about a fork, the media goes crazy and you think you're going to get another kind of Bitcoin, basically, because we've seen a million of them come out. But sometimes fork can be a regularly scheduled update. So taking Monero, for example, it has a hard fork twice a year as a regular update to the network. Not, forks aren't always contentious. And like Shrikar said, a soft fork is compatible with previous rules, whereas a hard fork isn't. Recently, I saw something, someone was talking about soft forks as thinking of it as Microsoft Word updates. So if you're thinking like, you're on Word 2013 and 2016 comes out, you can go to Word 2016 and view documents in 2013, but if you go the other way, some of the features might not be there. So easy way of thinking about it.
And kind of like you had talked a little bit about previously too, like when you're thinking about forks, there's a lot of people that, or like a lot of the connotation now with like Bitcoin Cash, it's like contentious. Everybody hates each other. You're on one side or the other side. Can you talk a little bit about like the difference between a contentious hard fork and a non-contentious hard fork, and kind of like what that really means in a lot of respects?
Sure. So a non-contentious hard fork is like kind of similar to just that network upgrade where, the whole entire network will benefit from that fork. There's no issues within the community. The miner signal, the node signal, they're all on board with it. So the network basically moves on as it were. Whereas a contentious hard fork is what can cause what's called a chain split, where, both those versions have the same history of the blockchain itself, because the blockchain essentially is just the chain with the longest history attached to it. And also to that point, you could actually have a fork every time two miners hit a block at the same time. But what happens is one ends up being mined onto the chain and one gets what's called orphaned. But again, the longest chain is the one that's going to survive. But on the topic of contentious hard forks, one of the most notable examples is also Ethereum and Ethereum Classic, which a lot of new investors will see and obviously get screwed up with the names because, you see two of the same asset and you're like, which one is the real one? And that actually tracks back to 2016 with an incident revolving around a project called the DAO, which was essentially like a decentralized VC where everyone got to kind of put their money together and it would be, voting on what would be kind of where it would go. And you could enter and exit the DAO. And someone figured out that the code wasn't fine and dandy, and they found what's called a recursive call exploit. So they were able to drain about a third of the DAO, which had over $100 million raised. It was one of the largest raises at the time. And the community tried to soft fork to solve the problem, which failed because there was an exploit in soft fork. So they're like, okay, we're going to hard fork to roll back what happened with the hacker, with the DAO, to recover the funds that were involved. Because at the time, it was a very significant value considering the value of Ethereum back then. But what happened with that hard fork was there was a contention of miners and community that were like, code is law. We can't just refund everyone. What happened due to the exploit. And thus Ethereum Classic was born because people decided to mine the old chain instead of fall in line with the hard fork upgrade that Ethereum experienced.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great. Oh.
Yeah, so Ethereum Classic literally follows that hack, and whatever happened with that hack, where the funds drained from the DAO in that address stayed in that address. They basically follow it to the T because they mined the L chain, followed the L chain, and with enough support, it got listed on Poloniex and then Kraken with the help of Barry Silbert. Barry Silbert likes to talk about Ethereum on his Twitter a lot, but that's kind of what kept it alive. Was that community saying, "Hey, what happened. We failed here. We're gonna stick to our guns."
Yeah, and going off that, Bitcoin Cash was a pretty contentious hard fork, and there's been a lot of debate as to why exactly Jihan Wu acted a certain way, and we were talking about this before, but the ASIC boost apparently gives them about a 30% advantage, right? And that's essentially why a lot of people think that they so strongly supported Bitcoin Cash back a few months ago. Yeah, and apparently it was patented. The attack itself was patented in 2013, but then Bitmain filed another patent in China saying that they had patented the ASIC boost attack. So there's been a lot of debate around every contentious hard fork, and it's primarily because miners want to make a lot of money, lately at least.
I'll keep it on you. For anybody who doesn't know what the ASIC boost attack is, do you want to touch on that?
So technically, I don't really know because I haven't seen the attack itself. But it was initially found by a mathematician. So for those interested, you should definitely read into it. Yeah.
Just for some of the newer members in the audience, cryptocurrency. The whole thing with Jihan, he runs a company called Bitmain, which is one of the largest mining firms out of China, and they control a significant amount of hash power in the Bitcoin network. And ASICs, when we're talking about ASICs, are like mining devices that are like geared towards mining, like not your kind of regular computer rig, but these devices are basically designed for that one function of mining. And he had this patented thing that was basically almost an unfair advantage. And during the Bitcoin Cash fork, what was happening was there was something activating called Segregated Witness, which removes signature data. Basically, it was a scalability upgrade for Bitcoin, but what happened was the miners were making less money when it was activated, which is kind of why he was like, all right, we're going to switch Bitcoin Cash, not do the whole segue thing, and then upgrade the block size.
Do you want to touch on the DAO just a little bit more? I mean, as far as like getting into governance and kind of around DAO and why that's important and why there's a lot of projects now that are looking at either what's happened with the DAO. And that's also, I think, a big knock against Ethereum at this point in time is what they've done. And now that the code isn't law anymore, it's not immutable. Either you want to touch on that?
Well, the thing about Ethereum is you'll find a lot of Bitcoin maximalists who are very, almost against Ethereum. And one of the largest talking points you'll find is the DAO, simply because it was a very contentious thing. Ethereum Classic was spawned for it because of what happened. And the idea is that, how can you kind of roll something back? I think it kind of veers on the lines of like governance, like figures in a blockchain. So when you think of Ethereum, you think of kind of immediately the first person that comes to mind is Vitalik Buterin, the person who created Ethereum. And one of the big problems that people see with what happened was a lot of the Ethereum founders had vested interests in the DAO. They were all participants in the DAO and actually contributed to the DAO as well. So when they were saying, hey, let's roll back the chain, and you're a follower of the Ethereum, you might not know kind of the nitty gritty of what's going on, but all of a sudden the figurehead, almost the authoritative figure in the Ethereum blockchain says, hey, let's do this. You might be inclined to say, hey, let's go. If he said it, it might be a great idea. So you kind of remove this decentralization element because you have these figureheads who you might follow because you trust them to a degree, but at the same time, they're the ones making that decision inadvertently and kind of bringing the crowd with them, which also, again, caused a contention with Ethereum Classic and why it spawned.
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw the Tezos and Decred projects too. They're trying to improve governance standards. This has been a big issue regarding forks and so forth. And Decred I particularly like just because it's been around for a while. So they're actively working on it. On top of that, they've been trying to combine proof of work and proof of stake pretty actively. They have a proof of work first and then a second round of proof of stake. And Tezos kind of tries to do that along with the smart contract scripting.
And so Tezos, everyone's kind of heard about Tezos in the news because of the foundation and what's going on with that, where, you had the project leads, the Brightmans in one kind of camp, and then you had the foundation in the other that controlled all the money. And when those two, get into it, you can't make the project happen because the money's being controlled by one, the development's being controlled by another. Aside from that, what Tezos is trying to do is along the lines of you're a developer, and instead of hard forking all the time for protocol upgrades, you're a developer. You submit a proposal to the network, and if it's accepted, you get paid by the holders of Tezos tokens to kind of streamline protocol upgrades in an easier format instead of doing like large hard forks to kind of keep upgrading the network, because they see hard forking as almost a centralized element because it is kind of that, it requires a lot of debate and it's activated by the network itself.
So one of the things that's been happening a lot recently has been not only forks, but airdrops, and it's pretty much just been raining free money for a lot of people. What's the difference between a fork and an airdrop? Make it rain.
I think, forks 100% always deal with like upgrading a protocol or a network, whereas an airdrop can literally just be a distribution, and it can be also for promotional reasons. I'm not sure if anyone here has had an Ethereum address with these kind of random amounts of tokens in them, like you don't know where you got it from, but it's in there, and and you'll just find them there, but you'll know about the project. It's like promotional thing. But another good example of an airdrop, if anyone's heard of Omisego, had a large airdrop to Ethereum holders, to kind of give back to the community, where it wasn't a protocol upgrade that was involved, but rather just giving back. You're just airdropping to everyone. You're giving everyone this token who meets a certain condition. Whereas it's not some kind of protocol movement.
I'm going to call out INS promo, Jury Online. What else do I have in my wallet right now? A lot of ones I don't understand. Just nothing I've ever bought, but they're in my wallet.
Actually, a lot of new ICOs are resorting to the airdrop model as well. I mean, one recent one is Exim Chain, for example. They had a pre-sale. A lot of ICOs have pre-sales and then resort to airdrops right after. I think they're going to do a lot more of this because they're trying to move away from selling securities, basically. And the SEC has kind of been. So on that front as well, airdrops are going to be seen a lot more with bounty programs and so on. The other thing is you might have been credited a lot of Tron. So a lot of scammy projects also airdrop just to increase.
Tron is not a scam, sir.
Right. So
Tron dogs.
A lot of projects also started crediting customers random tokens just because the more token holders there are, potentially, a lot of people cite Metcalfe's law as a way to value Bitcoin and other tokens. I think there's some reasoning to this, and it's been demonstrated with some papers. Academic work has been kind of lacking in this field, but you can kind of value how much a token might be worth by how many different token holders there are. So airdrops have been kind of interesting in that aspect as well.
And maybe one thing, Rocco, we've talked about this before, but you could touch on from like an airdrop standpoint, and Trikar, you talked a little bit about it too, but the movement from these companies that have typically done main sale ICOs where, maybe there's some type of pre-sale and then they do a main sale ICO, you do some KYC, you send some ETH to the address. When the SEC basically said every single ICO on the planet is a security, a lot of companies have stopped doing that. Now they're airdropping. Polymath is one of the big recent ones, and you've tweeted about it a couple of times where I think the Polymath airdrop is now worth like $400 USD, and all you literally had to do was give them all of your personal information, and you get $400 for free.
Very decentralized.
Not bad.
So, as Shrikar mentioned, you have a lot more projects going kind of the SAFT route, the accredited investor route, and then kind of dropping tokens to their communities. It's a way in which you can build a community, you build kind of these micro pools with liquidity, and obviously some of these projects just want enough of a community to speak out to exchanges and say, hey, why don't you list our token, because now we all have it, so we all have almost a vested interest. When the company kind of wraps it as hey, we're just doing this for the community to give back to the community. By the way, none of this is investment advice. Just gotta say that. But as you mentioned with Polymath, and if you're even new to the space with these airdrops and you kind of want to get involved in a community and join their Telegram and give up your information, unfortunately, the situation with Polymath was they sold all private, and then they were kind of one of the first ones to do this with ELF, where AELF did an airdrop and then listed on Binance. But Polymath was kind of more the, we might have a sale where ELF was kind of in the background, but Polymath didn't have a public-facing sale. They sold to private investors, and they had this airdrop, and you got 250 Poly tokens. And when 250 Poly tokens to each person participating ended up being, $1.60 a piece, you're looking at like almost like $400 just from participating in this and maybe just submitting a document that you're now part of this kind of ecosystem.
I'll repeat the question. Yeah. So first of all, I'll repeat the question just because there's a lot of people watching on the stream. Shout out to anybody who's watching on the stream. But the question is, why are these exchanges not making it so easy for airdropped cryptocurrencies to airdrops or forks to list quickly on exchanges? One of the first things, and you guys might have a different thought process on this, but regulation is like the biggest thing on the planet. Like regulation, and these exchanges are also charging a lot of money for companies to list. So they're not just going to say like, oh yeah, here's a free listing when the going rate to get on an exchange is quite a bit of money. So why just hold that hostage and get yourself some money later on? But,
yeah. Well, for the live stream, he was saying that Coinbase allowed customers to get Bitcoin Cash from Bitcoin, and also Binance allows the gas dividend from Neo. And a lot of what I have to my thought process on all this is, you don't want to set that kind of precedent if you're an exchange. So, I kind of respect Coinbase for what they did with Bitcoin Cash, even though they distributed Ethereum Classic but never listed it. But the thing is, if you start listing, I can go tomorrow. There's literally a website online where you could fork Bitcoin and make your own version of Bitcoin. If I'm an exchange and I start listing every single variation of Bitcoin, what's stopping someone from just keep forking it, keep listing it, keep forking it, keep listing it? And the validity of the actual fork just degrades over time, because everyone thinks, okay, if I fork the chain and make a new cryptocurrency, the exchange is going to list it. So what's stopping anyone here from literally going online and doing the same thing? Coinbase literally waited until the last minute, because they were saying, yeah, we're going to list it by I think the end of December, January, because it was such a hot topic of whether or not, because Coinbase was like a closed garden where listing on Coinbase is a huge thing, as you saw with the listing of Bitcoin Cash, where these exchanges have to take that into mind, where if we list this, what kind of precedent are we setting? I think Binance finally stopped after, I think Bitcoin Diamond. I think they allowed Bitcoin Cash, Gold, and then I think Diamond was the end of it, because then there was Super, God, Ultra, every Bitcoin Voltron. But if they keep listing every one, what's stopping the next one from coming out? And a lot of these forks, so to speak, are just not helping the ecosystem at all. Like something like Bitcoin Cash, you could say, okay, I'll respect what you're doing, even though I might not agree with it, but it's legitimate to a certain degree.
Where's my Litecoin Cash, sir? So just repeating, as far as participating in the airdrops with holdings on exchanges is kind of the subject for the stream. One comment I would have too, and I get asked this question all the time on Twitter. It's I have my money. I want to participate in Litecoin Cash. When's Coinbase going to list it? The short answer is go on Reddit, find out what exchanges or wallets are supporting it, and take 5 minutes of research and then move it over there, and don't trust Coinbase or somewhere else to go through that process, because maybe they'll support it, maybe they won't, maybe they'll support it 12 months from now. But if you really want it, there's going to be a list of places that will support it, and if you do that research, you'll find it.
Yeah. On the topic of airdrops and exchanges again, it's now this is more the airdrop idea. So you kind of look at the Ignis airdrop from NXT recently on Bittrex, and one of the big things where I think exchanges might take a bigger step back to all this. I mean, the hot one right now is Z Classic, which we'll definitely go into. Because that's been kind of a hot topic in the community. But if you take a look at what happened with the Ignis airdrop on Bittrex and the price action on NXT after they announced the support for it, it was absurd. Where Bittrex announced it like 8 days before the actual event, it exploded, and then 2 days before it got sold down dramatically. And your Bittrex, for example, you understand how much power you have in that whole entire equation when you say, hey, we're going to support Ignis, for example, and you know what it's going to do to NXT. So it's a very heavy decision for an exchange to be like, hey, we're going to support it on that end too, in terms of price action and kind of that certain level of manipulation to a degree.
On top of that, exchanges are kind of king right now. People don't really have any control over what exchanges tend to list. And you'd see more like HitBTC hasn't awarded their users, their NEO holders, gas for several months now. If exchanges are making enough money, they don't. So HitBTC obviously doesn't make as much money as Binance, so hence it'll list everything that comes its way, and Yobit too, right? We were talking about Yobit, but Binance wouldn't, because now it doesn't need to almost. So that's essentially it. Yeah. Yeah.
Should we? Yeah. Okay. We'll take some questions in a little bit. I think we'll do a Q&A at the end, if that's cool. Yeah, maybe just touching on. We'll kind of go over to the ZCL fork now, because that's probably one of the, between ZCL and Ethereum Classic with Callisto. Z Classic is kind of on the side of the forks. Ethereum Classic is, and Callisto airdrop. But we can dive into Z Classic, because that has been, there's been a lot of price movement on that, and it's also been fairly divisive from a community standpoint. A lot of people either think it's awesome and can be great, and a lot of people think it's a massive scam and just a money grab. So would love to touch a little bit on maybe you guys talking about what's happening with Z Classic. First, describe that situation for anybody who doesn't know, and then we'll dive into the specifics of it.
Okay, right. So Z Classic, right? Fork of Zcash, somewhere between. I wouldn't say it's a scam. So it's a community project. Basically, it started with one dev, Rhett, who kind of wanted to revive the ZCL project because all the devs left. And again, the reasoning was that there have been so many forks recently. I think he did it at an opportune time, because no Bitcoin fork has ZK snarks, essentially, although Zcash is basically that. But he wanted to use the network and then airdrop BTCP to all the Bitcoin holders. Effectively, this makes ZCL a future for a Bitcoin fork. And hence, we've seen like an incredible price rise. And I think Rocco has some pretty strong thoughts about the project.
Sure. As Shrikar mentioned, the kind of newer people have heard about Zcash as like kind of this privacy coin. And the thing about Zcash is there's a founder's reward where the initial investors in the project, I think they will get like 10% of the supply. I think over time, I think the total is it might be 10 or 20. I got to double check on that.
They get money.
They get money. Basically, when the miners are mining, it's a split reward where the miners aren't receiving the entire block reward for Zcash, but rather part of it is going to the investors. And Rhett said, you know what, let me change these lines of code and make Z Classic, which was essentially Zcash, same exact thing. It was a fork without the founder's reward. So just a good example of a fork where, we're just going to change the network slightly and make our own coin here that removes, in the case of Zcash, the founder's reward. And the interesting thing, as Shrikar mentioned, was the project essentially, he wanted to revive it. And he decided that, we're going to do this whole Bitcoin private thing. create this fork / airdrop of Bitcoin private coins to both Bitcoin holders and Z Classic holders. And he caught it from the point that he's doing the right thing. He caught it at a time where it was a little contentious with forks because we've seen so many, so it's hard to kind of judge offhand. He has built the whole Z Classic movement has built a huge community base where you have miners on board, you have people promoting on board. So it's a little strange because then you could see it also on the other side is like, hey, they knew what they were doing, so they could have bought it up beforehand, and the price action was intense. I think at the beginning of December, it was around $1 or like, a little over $1, and now we're seeing it hit over $200 in the span of like a month or two. So, when people were saying that some of them had pre-mines where, developers will take a large chunk before releasing, people were kind of comparing them knowing beforehand and what they were kind of about to embark on as a pre-mine by buying it up and knowing what was going to happen to it. Not to the I don't think they expected, that kind of price action, but they kind of knew what they were doing, in my opinion, at least.
So some people are looking at, I think, like Bitcoin Private Z Classic as like kind of an attack or hijacking Bitcoin's brand. Do you feel in some ways that it's just kind of like a stealthy marketing move where you're, hey, we're Bitcoin, just kidding?
Yeah, I kind of personally, I don't like the whole kind of brand thing. If you want to create something new, like change the name at least to a certain degree, because as soon as you say Bitcoin Private, the Bitcoin community immediately is like, oh, it's another version of Bitcoin. This is great. And they're just going to kind of eat it up. And it, in a way, it's like Bitcoin Cash. Be Bitcash. Be unique. Don't say Bcash around Roger Ver, but Bitcoin, be unique. Don't just hijack the brand as a marketing ploy, because as soon as even new investors will see Bitcoin Private and say, wow, that's Bitcoin, right? Or see Bitcoin Cash on Coinbase and say, oh, right, that's Bitcoin. So it's kind of almost a little bit of social engineering thrown in. So yes. So
not a Roger fan.
Yeah.
I mean, from an investing perspective, it was pretty obvious what was going to happen right after you announced the fork. So not investment advice. But so yes, I think there's definitely something to say about Red buying up a lot of ZCL beforehand. We don't know exactly what happened, but I think it's obvious to most of the people who even heard about the fork early on that would be happening. So unsure like what is right or wrong here, because if everyone knows and everyone's acting upon this, I think if 80% of the people know and then they're all acting on that knowledge, then I think, I don't know, it's morally ambiguous, but I'm still unsure, I guess.
So one of the big things when it comes down to forks like now, or with Z Classic and Bitcoin Private, and then previously with Bitcoin Gold or Bitcoin Cash, it's replay protection. A lot of people are saying, yelling, there's no replay protection, or okay, this project's great, it has replay protection. What's replay protection and why does it matter?
Sure. I think a funny instance was when Bitcoin Gold didn't have replay protection until maybe a few hours before they were going to fork. Essentially, replay protection means that, okay, you have a hard fork, you're going to have chain A, chain B, but let's say you spend on chain A, you don't want someone to replay that spend on chain B, because basically these are UTXOs, just unspent outputs, right? And you can just have that same transaction replayed if you don't sign it a different way on the second chain.
And yeah, that comes down to kind of malicious actors in a sense. Let's say you're buying, your let's say you're buying a computer on Newegg with Bitcoin, and a malicious actor decides, let me relay that on both chains. So you're essentially giving Newegg both your Bitcoin and your Bitcoin Gold, because then you check your Bitcoin Gold wallet and say, hey, why is it all gone? Because remember, it was 1-to-1 when the chain split. They could replay that transaction on the other chain. So essentially, you're giving out both potentially if a malicious actor decides to relay that to chain A instead of just chain B.
So one thing that's been brought up recently, and I saw this on Twitter recently. I think it was from Nick Carter, if I remember correctly. Yeah. Backstreet Boys. But so this is talking about, forks affecting the market capitalization of coins, because you see Bitcoin Gold right now. Bitcoin Gold is, I don't know, worth how many billions of dollars, but is it actually worth a tenth of that? So maybe if you guys want to talk upon like what the forks do to impact the market capitalization of, especially when you're forking off Bitcoin, because Bitcoin's market cap is whatever, 175, $200 billion right now. You fork that off, you have a massive valuation, and then newbies buy in and say, oh, wow, this is a $200 billion or $2 billion cryptocurrency. It must be legit. And it's not. So yeah, do you guys want to talk on that?
Sure. I think Nick's tweet was actually about Monero V, where just an unannounced out of nowhere, someone's like, hey, we're doing Monero V. It's going to be a fork of Monero. It's going to have, Mimblewimble, just like throwing some buzzwords around, even though Mimblewimble hasn't really been deployed yet on any, I think Grin's actually doing, but no one's really kind of has it down yet. But yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to hard fork Monero. And I think a lot of what comes down to is it's called the glamour cap. I think he was saying where, you have enough of a supply when the coin is released, and you have enough afraid people of getting that coin. So remember, replay protection is a real thing. And let's say Monero V doesn't have replay protection. So a lot of people aren't going to try to claim it, but the people who know the project are going to try to claim it. So once they claim it and start trading it, they can start trading it whatever price they want and trade it up. So if you set a high enough price and a low enough supply that's claimed, you're going to end up with this, what's called glamour cap, where you go on, every trader that anyone knows is addicted to CoinMarketCap. They want to check it every day to see, how much percentage every one of their assets is moving at a rapid rate. And you see Monero V out of nowhere with this ridiculous cap because it has, low volume and a high price and a high supply because it forked from Monero. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I got to get my Monero V. I got to get my, whatever forked coin because you saw it. And then all of a sudden, because now it's in the top 50, other people are seeing how quickly the price action is going. They're going to start to go in. So it becomes almost a marketing effort outside of a market effort when this kind of thing happens.
Yeah. The other interesting phenomenon I think we've all been seeing is that new projects tend to have way higher market caps than similar projects that were a few years old. Right. And this is really for no reason, because these projects have been working on the same thing for several years. There's so many storage projects, for example. And I think it's the same idea, really. You're building on the same brand, right, with these forks, but now it's a new brand too. So that's like, it's become a marketing ploy, really, especially with some of the newer forks.
Yeah. Like Bitcoin Gold had the advantage of having the supply of Bitcoin and enough hype to trade for a couple $100, which brought it to like that top 20 space, which almost, I guess, pseudo-legitimized it, where people were like, okay, Bitcoin Gold, even though it had very rocky beginnings with a failed ICO and pre-mine and no replay protection, but everyone forgot that as soon as they saw it in the top 20. They were like, wow, this is definitely legitimate because it's got such a high market cap, like Tron.
BitConnect was top 10 for a hot minute, so... Carlos Modest from the Bronx, right? Where is he here? Is there anything you guys, maybe I missed, that you guys want to touch on before we maybe take questions?
I got to say, one of the most interesting things I've noticed about the cryptocurrency space is the amount of drama that can be generated. Like every day you'll go on Twitter, every day you'll see the news. It's like a soap opera. Like you just want to see what's going on. And then sometimes you'll see these like micro pockets of activity where you're like, whoa, I didn't realize this was going on in this one isolated community. And one of the most recent things was actually about forks, and it dealt with the Saya community. So I'm not sure anyone here knows Saya Coin. It's a decentralized storage project, and they've been around for a number of years. And their parent company, Nebulous, started an ASIC manufacturing company called Obelisk, and they were creating ASIC miners for Saya. And they're like, okay, we're going to release these miners in 2018, Q1, Q2. We'll have a date. Everyone bought up the pre-sale because there wasn't an ASIC miner for Saya yet. All of a sudden, in January, before Obelisk is able to get to the market, Bitmain, the company we were talking about earlier with Jihan, released a ASIC miner for Saya, effectively beating Saya because it's Nebulous to the market. And the community right now is going through their own pit of drama because they're like, they have the ability to soft fork Saya to invalidate Bitmain's miner and only validate their ASIC miner. but the team has actually thankfully taken a step back and said, we will only soft fork the network if Bitmain acts maliciously. Because with those ASIC miners, you can control a network if you have enough hashing power. And ASIC miners get very powerful. ASIC miners blow GPU miners out of the water. So it's even just, you can find in any community, you will always find that kind of amount of drama. In the case of Saya, it's fork drama. So I was about to say, if you go and search, there definitely find like little micro pockets of activity like that. And that's what makes this kind of stuff fun, is that it's like one giant soap opera. Keeps it interesting. Besides the price volatility, that feels like a roller coaster.
Yeah, cryptocurrency markets have been especially interesting because I think sentiment has really been affecting price more than anything else. And this is sentiment that's been carefully imposed upon by big players in the space. And you can see weird Reddit smear campaigns, even 4chan, like somehow affects the price. And you can write very simple models, and it's ridiculous how correlated prices are with. Yeah. Anyway, my point being that I think we're seeing a lot of miners slowly making less and less profits over time, and I think this is also leading to a lot more forks. So we're gonna have to see higher governance standards over time, but there'll be this weird battle between users of the network and miners. Miners can be users too, but you know what I mean. But on top of that, there's only 11.3 thousand full nodes running. So, there's really not that many people running these full nodes. So it begs the question, like, who's actually controlling the price dynamics? There's some very big players moving price all the time. And if you can track these wallets, it's all public too, but you can track movements out of these wallets and into exchanges and pretty much accurately see how price is going to move over short periods of time.
We'll take some questions now. I think there were some beforehand. If anybody has any specific questions, we have this, like, you got it. Fancy microphone.
So cool. Speak it to the box.
Speaking of the mic, Billy.
So my question is on the future of centralized exchanges. This feels so dumb, I swear to God. Okay, anyways, so centralized exchanges. My question is, how do you see the future of it? And there are projects such as District 0x and Loopring, which are practically trying to make protocols which would let you make decentralized exchanges. But the thing is that majority of people who are in this market, I don't see them utilizing atomic swaps or going down the route of using decentralized exchanges when they can use two-factor authentication to get into Binance and all that. So doesn't centralized exchanges like miners controlling a lot of hash power defeat the purpose of decentralization? And where do you see the future of these exchanges?
I could start too. I think centralized exchanges, number one, are going to continue to kill it for the time being. They're literally printing money. I think Coinbase is well over $1 billion in run rate. The founder of Binance has gone from basically a nobody 7 months ago to now a billionaire on the front page of Forbes. So owning a centralized exchange is pretty awesome until you're BitGrail or CoinCheck, and then you're getting your face ripped off and hacked, and you're just screwing everything up. So I do think every single time there's a BitGrail event or like a thing with CoinCheck where they lose $500 million of NEM or something like that, that's another mark for decentralization. But it's going to take some time I don't think the decentralized exchanges are there yet by any stretch. And the usability at least has to be on par, if not better, for decentralized exchanges over centralized exchanges before regular users like you and me are actually going there over going to Binance or to GDAX or wherever.
Yeah. And to that point, it's like, we could sit here and say, like, decentralize the world a million times, but at the end of the day, we're still heavily centralized to a certain degree. And a lot of that comes down to, honestly, the learning curve. So we'll sit here, we'll use Ether Delta, we'll use, a 0x, a relayer, but the average user, the reason why Coinbase has been so successful, in my opinion, is because they created the ultimate UX. You can know nothing about Bitcoin, go onto Coinbase, make an account, and buy Bitcoin. It's the easiest thing. Whereas just using Ether Delta as the example, you are the owner of a wallet. You already have tokens. You got to know how to send Ethereum transactions outside of the exchange holding your hand. You have to send it to a smart contract. You have to put your order in. Then you have to withdraw it from the smart contract. And it's like the new users are, it's still, you need a lot more education first before we kind of hit that period of decentralization, which we all like to harp on. But at the end of the day, we're still very heavily centralized.
Yeah. On top of that, I think fiat gateways are still going to exist for a while. Regardless, right? There's a lot more people trying to get in than get out. And hence Coinbase is profitable. And I mean, even if people were trying to get out, it'd still be profitable. But on top of that, I think you said District 0x, but maybe you meant 0x, like the radar relay and so on, right? I think more people that are using these decentralized exchanges, the more powerful it becomes, just like the entire Bitcoin network. Yeah. So over time, I'm sure decentralized exchanges will take over. On top of that, I think a lot of these, having talked to some of these exchanges, they're going to remove transaction fees because you don't really need transaction fees to trade between your internal wallets. And they're going to adopt a different model going forward over time. Also, listing fees will decrease a lot. So yeah, there will be some weird competition, I'm sure, because these centralized exchanges still want to stay relevant. And people still want to be listed on them because they provide legitimacy to a certain extent. So yeah, and funds are backing them. So there's still competition from that front.
Quick follow-up. What do you think about Robinhood getting into the game?
You know, I haven't used it. I don't think it's not legal in New York, right?
No.
Yeah. So
But in general.
I'm pretty excited, but I'll have to use it first. I don't know how they're doing. Yeah.
From what I heard, you can't deposit or withdraw. I think they just launched today in the fives. I think it's like New Hampshire, California, and like 3 others.
Right.
But honestly, whatever brings more people into the space, I'm all for. But at the end of the day, I think a lot more research, emphasis on research has to be done, because they could list 15, 16 assets and be like, wow, this is crazy. They're listing all this. As a cryptocurrency investor, you're like, wow, this is great. And then you kind of in the back of your head, you're like, wait a second. The people investing in this have no idea what they're actually investing in. That's not good. So again, I think just the educational component again is like, great, Robinhood's entering the scene and bringing people in, but like, wait a second, how do we explain what this all is to them?
Yeah, I think anything that provides competition against Coinbase too is like, I like, a lot of people hate Coinbase. I'm probably one of the few that actually thinks the market would not be anywhere near as high as it is right now if Coinbase didn't make it like ridiculously easy for like an 89-year-old grandpa to buy Bitcoin. Yeah, at the top at $20,000 after CNBC told him to. But yeah, I think anybody that's like, Robinhood is probably one of the few companies that can legitimately compete against Coinbase because they have so much money and funding in the bank, and they're going to need that to actually not start off in 5 states, but go to 48 or 50 states wherever it's actually legal in the U.S.
Until New York figures out their bit license situation.
Do you think the conventional exchanges might link into like the stock exchange might move towards listing cryptocurrencies as well?
So do you mean like traditional stock exchanges just moving into crypto?
Also increasing their capacities to list crypto?
Honestly, I think...
result on these exchanges, essentially.
Yeah, I don't think we're there yet at all. I think we're still... I hate saying we're early because it makes it like, yeah, we're on the ground floor. Bitcoin's going to go another like 5,000%. It's like, no, it's not. But it's still early in terms of volume. And you're still going to find big institutional money that still hasn't taken the plunge because there's still not enough liquidity. Like we're still what, a $400 billion asset class. There's really not much going on here as of yet. But I think as things ramp up, maybe years from now, you might see something like that. But I don't think in the near future, to be completely honest.
Yeah, I agree with Rocco. There's not enough volume yet. You can move the price of several coins by like 80% just by selling off the entire order book right now. Yeah. It's gonna take a while.
Do you want to grab the? I think you had your hand.
Send him the box.
Throw that thing. That's what it's made for.
I think you can box it. Yeah, throw the box.
There you go. All right. Let's try this. Back on the topic of forks, let's say you're running a massive exchange or even a custodian operation. How can these organizations kind of prepare for forks, stay ahead of, understand what forks are coming up? I don't think Reddit is the answer. Do you have a better answer?
As far as like the organizations themselves,
yeah, I mean, we're talking massive custodial operations, trading operations, which deal with institutional money and clients. So Reddit is not the answer.
No, it's definitely not. I was talking more for like retail investors. But I think CZ from Binance had a good tweet recently, the CEO of Binance, where he talked about like there were a lot of people moaning about Binance not doing certain things like listing new forks and airdrops, and he literally like rambled off like 9 or 10 things that go on behind the scenes where people were like complaining about the price of fees and things like that. And you have an OPSEC team, and you have to deal with regulation, you have to deal with this and that. And there's a lot that goes on there. I feel like it's probably a stupid statement, but like if there's actually a legitimate fork, like I have a YouTube channel and I'm not very important, and I hear like I get emails from everybody. If there's something important going on, Binance is probably going to hear about it, or Coinbase is probably going to hear about it. They're going to have people knocking on their door to get them to get into there. So I think that's probably one of the the amount of inbound outreach, or the amount of inbound outreach they probably get, is probably ridiculous. So a lot of that I'm sure comes to them prior to the project really even getting some level of development.
Yeah, literally, like you just said, I as many times as people will comment on like a Bittrex status or a Binance status, why haven't you listed X? Obviously, it's on their radar. Like they could ignore it, but it's still there. They know of it, and then I think they're just like annoyed by it at this time. But to go back to kind of the institutional side of it and the custodial side, I think Grayscale recently, Barry Silbert's investment trust with Bitcoin, sold their Bitcoin Cash and issued it to the people holding, and it took months because they needed to do the research on it. They needed to make sure how to calculate everything. They needed to make sure how to handle it. Like it was a full multi-month long operation, and everyone's like, if you go back to like when it's going to get listed, all these people are like, yeah, why isn't it being listed tomorrow? And it's like they have to go through all these steps to actually get it done first and protect people from them potentially dropping the ball at the end of the day. Like they know they'll get it, but it's the attention economy that's kind of dwindled in cryptocurrency, where like a year has become a month, has become a day, has become an hour. So we're a month from a certain event. It's like, wow, it's been like years. Because just how fast the space is moving.
I guess maybe one follow-up to that. So do you expect, or do you foresee institutions kind of having people who participate in these communities to just stay out of the curve, have this information, Bitcoin Core, or whatever that is? Do you see that happening, especially with institutions that have massive exposure?
Oh, completely. They definitely have boots on the ground, like under different handles, who might not openly say, hey, we're,
sure.
Yeah, but 100% they have people on the ground. Like they don't have just the consultant. They also have people in their, in the actual institution going through the Reddit forums, going through the tweets and all of that.
More than just that, this is a very close community. And if someone's developing something, there's bound to be someone at every exchange who knows about it very quickly. Everyone knows about everything, and everyone's trying to list things that are legit.
And one point too, I mean, as far as like institutional investors getting in, that was like, I spoke to Ari Paul like a couple hours ago, and yeah, he's like my Warren Buffett. I woke up this morning, I was like, I get to speak to Ari. But that was like the big question I had for him was like, how are institutional investors getting the space, or what's holding them back? And the big thing he talked about was custody. Like property custody services, and it's not there yet. It's just not.
And it's also connectivity. I hate to say it, some of these exchanges are really amateur exchanges as far as institutions are concerned. So
that was a point that he made too. It's like, is a massive financial institution really going to throw $50 million on Poloniex and say, okay, yeah, we're good? No.
Everyone knows exchanges are printing money and then every average Joe wants to make their own exchange. So yeah, like you just said, it's that trust factor too and the technology.
Okay, thanks.
The box. Am I? Okay. Oh, great. Guys, 2 questions. I'm a new user. When the crash happened, I was just researching, came across this project, Tether. Apparently the price just stays at $1. Can you just explain why? I'm a new user, man, sorry. And the next question is, more on like economy level. regulations have really given a big blow to the crypto markets, as we've all seen. At the, like, you guys spoke about how the drama happens and the price moves. Yeah, I mean, I call them parking tickets. But like in the big realm of things, what other major speed breakers could we run into that would have like massive blow to the entire ecosystem, like we saw with regulations?
You could probably spend like multiple hours on Tether if
we're going to invite Bitfinex to the next meeting.
If you want to see some good Tether conspiracy theories, follow Bitfinex on Twitter, and you will get 60 tweets a day about Bitfinex. But there's a relationship between Bitfinex and Tether. Tether is supposed to be a cryptocurrency that's pegged to the US dollar. So for every one Tether, it's $1. There's a lot of questions about the validity of that. They haven't had an official audit. Their auditor left them. There's a lot of questions about that. But there's nobody has a concrete answer. I personally don't really use Tether. It gets taxed the same as trading out to the US dollar does. So I don't really care that much if I have to use it, I usually stay away from it. But as far as
use it because it's illegal to use in the United States.
Yeah. And as far as regulation goes, I think the one big thing that concerns me is, for the most part, like Bitcoin is any like cryptocurrencies that have been created from mining. They seem good to go. The CFTC has come out and said positive things about them. Chairman John Carlo from the CFTC is like a Twitter hero for crypto Twitter now. The Chairman Clayton from the SEC basically said every single ICO I've ever seen ever is a security. So the question is whether they go back and retroactively enforce ICO, regulation on all the companies that have done an ICO, and that would be not good news.
Yeah, Tether, right? Anyway, there's a bunch of stable coins actually, new bits. Base coins coming out. They were just raised 80 million, trying to raise 800 million. So basically, anything that's pegged. We'll see which stablecoin wins out, but there's plenty of them actually, not just Tether. And what moves these markets, there's a bunch of Korean government officials who actually were found to have been insider trading. This was a few months ago, but every year China kind of releases a certain set of statements that kind of moves the market as well. There's miners moving markets with their actions. Mempools get clogged. There's a lot of factors for sure, and every little bit of news that wouldn't affect normal markets completely affect crypto. So I just look out for basic news on Twitter, honestly, if you're looking for what affects news. Yeah.
So you mentioned insider trading, which is a term we recognize from legacy trading, right? Yeah. So the question, and going back to the same thing as finding a Tether, a base coin. So wouldn't the focus, or shouldn't the focus, my question is, shouldn't the focus be on legitimizing and regulating, finding those auditors for those coins that are going to be like a Tether, those base coins? And if we start there, if we find a common place where we can recognize as legitimate, then that could bring more confidence into the market and more stability in those stable coins that are regulated. Why don't we just regulate the stable coins? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, I think they will be soon. I don't work with the government, but I think that is the push right now. A lot of people are concerned about what will happen if Tether is found to be, insolvent and they don't have enough USD in their bank accounts. Yeah, we'll see. Also, Basecoin is a very specific project. These are all called stable coins as a collective. Yeah.
I think honestly, kind of bringing the regulation in has been kind of a touchy subject, because you want, honestly, at the end of the day, you kind of want regulation to step in, get rid of the scams, kind of legitimize everything. But at the end of the day, a lot of when regulation steps in, it's usually like the 2 steps in, and then eventually the 1 step back. And that's the biggest problem is things have kind of been moving at breakneck speeds. How do they regulate is the one big question they're still asking. And the other thing that the whole community is concerned about is overregulation, because they could just step in and shut everything down, but then you stifle innovation. So it turns into a very complicated mess. But at the end of the day, I honestly think we are still moving towards regulation, which could be a good thing to kind of get rid of the scams, like I said, but it's very tricky. That's the big part about it.
So I have a question about insurance. So one of the main reasons exchanges are as expensive as they are is the insurance requirements by the SEC and federal laws. So as you move towards a decentralized exchange, who's going to be required to carry that insurance and how do they get it, given that insurers are right now unwilling to underwrite even Coinbase?
Oh, in the case of the decentralized exchange, no one. The one big thing in this space is the kind of that self-responsibility, you're in your wallet, you send it to one wrong address, no one's going to pick up the tab for that. It's again, earlier we were talking about the learning curve. That's one of the hardest things about this space is explaining how wallets work and where to send. And it's still complicated. It isn't that kind of like easy, user-friendly thing. And in the case of decentralized exchanges, you want to trade outside of the auspices of a centralized exchange. That's the risk you're putting yourself in, is not having that insurance backing it. That's the big.
And do you think the federal government will allow that in the United States?
With the case of decentralized exchanges?
Yes, on a massive scale.
The question is, who do you prosecute? In the case of so take Ether Delta, for example, it's just a smart contract. It's just a program where no one's actually, there facilitating everything. You're literally sending it to a program, trading through that program, and it's coming back to you. The network itself, the Ethereum network decentralized, maintains that contract because it's logged in. It's been sent to the blockchain. It's kind of in there. And there's the contract creator could be the possibility of Zach from, he's co-founder of First Blood who made the Ether Delta contract, but the actual contract itself has no central authority to a certain point. Which I was at a different conference. It was Blockchain for Wall Street a couple months ago, and central exchanges. Someone asked the question, "Hey, same question. Who do we go after with decentralized exchanges?" And everyone on the panel, all the legal experts, were like, "We'll find someone. We don't know, but we'll find someone."
I think the big point of concern there is really the smart contracts. Not even in the insurance. It's decentralized exchanges are great, but as anybody's seen with the parity multi-sig wallet hack, when the co-founder of Ethereum literally can't write a secure smart contract, it's probably not the best thing in the world for all the other smart contracts out there as well. So I think that's an issue. Is just there's different counterparty risk with everything, and with decentralized exchanges, it's do you really trust the person who's creating that smart contract to be technically competent enough to write something that is actually going to work and not hijack your funds or lose them, or have some random dude on Twitter write one line of code that's going to invalidate $150 million worth of Ethereum. So
DevOps 199. Yeah, and that's a huge. Someone just said just fork it. That's a huge thing in the Ethereum community right now. Is the whole parity situation. You have over $100 million in Ethereum locked up because someone went and I think deleted the library function that had the withdraw function attached to the multi-sigs from parity. And another point of contention: do you fork to correct the issue with parity because you have over $100 million locked up? Or do you tell Parity, and I think Economy also has funds locked up, and I think Golem also has funds locked up, but you tell them, you know what? You put your trust in Parity failed, we can't do anything for you. And that's, again, a question of forking and governance. It's do we do this? Well, there's some people who say code is law, and there's some people who are let's do it to help them out. It's how do you treat governance? Do you go for the code is law idea, or do you kind of veer towards that central, hey, let's help everyone out, kumbaya kind of thing, which isn't kumbaya to everyone? It gets complicated, but again, that's if anyone wants to look into a current issue with Ethereum, again, it's the parity wallet failure with the multi-sig wallets related to forking.
Okay, so two things. First thing regarding the forks, my impression is that once the Bitcoin Cash got listed on Coinbase, everybody started, making these forks because everybody thought, and buying them. Everybody thought they're going to go to the moon just because of what happened with Bitcoin Cash. But that's my personal, opinion. But I don't understand Bitcoin at this point of time. Why does everybody say it's going to go like so much higher? Because we have all these coins that are like third generation coins, and that once they get listed on Coinbase and the other exchanges, like why is Bitcoin going to go further up? I don't understand, like why not? Because right now, for example, me, I buy Bitcoin or Ethereum just to buy altcoins. And then if I would be able to buy altcoins through the other, third generation coins, why would I need Bitcoin? And there was even an article that even the underground world is not using Bitcoin anymore. So, yeah, why is, I mean, I understand all the infrastructure and all the ATM, Bitcoin ATMs. But other than that, like, why does it have to be like at this point of time, with all the other more sophisticated coins? Why does it have to be still that precious?
And I think the thing about Bitcoin is the first point you mentioned about it being the biggest trading pair is a big factor. But I think at the end of the day, a lot of it comes down to name recognition and the fact that it was the first mover. It was kind of what spurned every single cryptocurrency. It is one of the greatest experiments in decentralization. Like, you point to cryptocurrency, Bitcoin is this beacon of light that's like, you don't know any of this until you know Bitcoin. And everything's kind of derived from Bitcoin. And I think, honestly, it's just that psychology of this is where we started. And, it's the first asset they're trading futures on. Institutions are slowly getting involved. It is still going to be the asset regardless. You can have other trading pairs against other coins, and it might make those other coins, move up in value. And I mean, that aside, I think, honestly, it still comes down to that first mover advantage. Bitcoin has been the greatest experiment in decentralization where it's, you want drama, like you got Bitcoin. And that just proves how, like, it's still moving as a decentralized project because there's so many, issues and contention and all that, is that it's still, it's proved it's what it sought out to do.
So one thing too that I think, like, both Bitcoin and Ethereum, like, everybody falls in love with these like sexy third generation platforms, like, I don't know, IOTA. It's a DAG. It has all this incredible functionality. And then you have a couple of smart security guys get behind it and IOTA doesn't function, or in some cases they have found that it doesn't function as well. Bitcoin has always functioned pretty much exactly how it was intended to function. And the reliability there is one of the biggest things and one of the biggest, aspects of it. A lot of these third generation platforms are simply theoretical at this point in time. And besides Bitcoin and Ethereum, the usability, maybe Monero, the usability really hasn't been tested for the vast majority of them. So I think that's one of the big components of it, at least in my mind, is like they're all theoretical for the most part outside of what Bitcoin is doing, what Ethereum is doing, and all these scalability issues that they're trying to solve. And every platform out there that tells me they can do 1 million transactions per second, well, can you actually do that, or is that just in your white paper?
On top of that, every few months, Vitalik reminds everyone that all the coins could drop to zero. So that is a genuine thing. I think Ethereum could go to zero and still have the same functionality. Yeah, the only thing that's propping up the values is that more people want to buy than sell. So when that tide shifts, you should sell. Yeah. I think that's just.
He's a qualified financial advisor.
That's not.
He's handing out business cards after this.
But I think that's how everyone trades, right? So, yeah, I'll just gauge.
Where's that little square microphone thingy?
Yeah. Pass him the cube.
There you go. Tear it up. It's all yours. It's all yours.
For the people on the stream, there is currently a dog eating a microphone right now.
It's adorable.
Puppy. How you doing?
It is a large lab eating a cube microphone to describe it.
First, I just want to thank you guys for your time. Really appreciate it. When everyone evaluates coins a lot, I believe a lot that goes into it is looking at the community and how big that community is. And I think it was mentioned earlier when discussing Z Classic that there is community behind it and it's strong. And I'm just wondering whether there's current forks or potential future forks, how big of an issue is that to be concerned about? Where are you losing that community? Is it the same community that works on both? Is there overlap there? Because it was a little confusing to me when thinking about Z Classic and Z Cash, just as an example. Is that same community where both are benefiting? Because if you lose that community, then that fork is an issue. It's not just kind of funny anymore.
So I think in the case of Z Classic and Bitcoin Private, so they're kind of the same thing. Like was said earlier, Z Classic is essentially a futures market for Bitcoin Private because there's really not going to be much value to Z Classic once that's over, because apparently most of the developers, if I'm not mistaken, are all moving from Z Classic to Bitcoin Private. So it's basically a futures market. And I think the one thing that you need from a community, like there's nobody, or it's kind of an interesting case because Z Classic is taking everybody and moving them over to Bitcoin Private. There was really no, to my knowledge, there was no community. There was no Z Classic community really prior to a month ago before it went from $5 to $200. The one thing that's kind of needed there, though, is like a central figure that like people get behind. And I think in Z Classic's case, like there's their lead developer, Rhett. Whether you like him or you don't, there's a name to put there. He's like the Bitcoin Private Vitalik, and then everybody gets behind it and can follow them on Reddit and do all that stuff. And then they have that element of like having a community. And also, I think too, I mean, outside of just like in fork cases, in a lot of cases, in my opinion, I joke about it, but like community is like a lot of times just bag holders. Like they're not using the product, they're not doing anything. They just bought a lot, they're speculating, and they're like, yeah, let's go Tron, hey, and they, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a huge problem. Is in the early days, I guess, not even in the early days. It's like these markets create almost these artificial communities where you were only supporting the project when it was hitting double-digit positive percentage numbers per day, so on some crazy run, and then all of a sudden you became a community member, and then all of a sudden you become disengaged when you're a bag holder, and the value drops because it had too ridiculous of a run. So it's becoming a huge problem where even with the Z Classic, like he's saying, there was really no Z Classic community until the price of Z Classic exploded, and then all of a sudden everyone was a big Z Classic fan that Z Cash had the founders reward. Nah, we're going to do away with that. We're all on board with it.
So when you say community, you're referring more to from an investment standpoint, not a developer community.
Oh no, I mean both. I think about the thing about Z Classic is how all these people came on after the explosive price action. So how do you? It's hard to almost gauge that in a way. It's that a community versus a developer community, because if a price action is there, everyone wants to get on board for some strange reason because they just really kind of supported it from day one.
Yeah. On top of that, the community has only been growing, so it hasn't been like, oh, there's one community and it kept splitting into different portions, but rather there's been a split and then more infusion of people buying that coin or developing for that coin. So I think it's just been an influx of people getting into the space in general. So right now, at least, there doesn't seem a reason to be concerned about forks, but a few months in, I think, I don't think we'll see that many more forks.
For everybody watching the stream, I think we're going to turn it off now at this point in time. So thank you to everybody watching on the stream. Appreciate that. Smash the like button.